Chapter 1 of The Flying Saucers Are Real. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording by Roger Melin. The Flying Saucers Are Real by Donald Keyhoe. Chapter 1. Author's Note. On April 27, 1949, the U.S. Air Force stated, "The mere existence of some yet unidentified flying objects necessitates a constant vigilance on the part of Project Saucer personnel and on the part of the civilian population. Answers have been, and will be, drawn from such factors as guided missile research activity, balloons, astronomical phenomena. But there are still question marks. Possibilities that the saucers are foreign aircraft have also been considered, but observations based on nuclear power plant research in this country label as highly improbable the existence on Earth of engines small enough to have powered the saucers. Intelligent life on Mars is not impossible, but is completely unproven. The possibility of intelligent life on the planet Venus is not considered completely unreasonable by astronomers. The saucers are not jokes. Neither are they cause for alarm. On December 27, 1949, the Air Force denied the existence of flying saucers. On December 30, 1949, the Air Force revealed part of a secret Project Saucer report to members of the press at Washington. The official report stated, "It will never be possible to say with certainty that any individual did not see a spaceship, an enemy missile, or some other object." Discussing the motives of possible visitors from space, the report also stated, "Such a civilization might observe that on Earth we now have atomic bombs, and are fast developing rockets. In view of the past history of mankind, they should be alarmed. We should therefore expect at this time above all to behold such visitations." In its April 22 report, Project Saucer stated that space travel outside the solar system is almost a certainty. On February 22, 1950, the Air Force again denied the existence of flying saucers. On this same date, 2 saucers reported above Key West Naval Air Station were tracked by radar. They were described as maneuvering at high speed, 50 miles above the Earth. The Air Force refused to comment. On March 9, 1950, a large metallic disk was pursued by F-51 and jet fighters and observed by scores of Air Force officers at Wright Field, Ohio. On March 18th, an Air Force spokesman again denied that saucers exist and specifically stated that they were not American guided missiles or space exploration devices. I have carefully examined all Air Force saucer reports made in the last 3 years. For the past year, I have taken part in a special investigation of the flying saucer riddle. I believe that the Air Force statements, contradictory as they appear, are part of an intricate program to prepare America and the world for the secret of the disks. Chapter 1. It was a strange assignment. I picked up the telegram from my desk and read it a third time. New York, New York, May 9, 1949. Have been investigating flying saucer mystery. First tip hinted gigantic hoax to cover up official secret. Believe it may have been planted to hide real answer. Looks like terrific story. Can you take over Washington end? Ken W. Purdy, editor, True Magazine. I glanced out at the Potomac, recalling the first saucer story. As a pilot, I'd been skeptical of flying disks. Then reports had begun to pour in from Air Force and airline pilots. Apparently alarmed, the Air Force had ordered fighters to pursue the fast-flying saucers. In one mysterious chase, A pilot had been killed, and his death was unexplained. That had been 17 months ago. Since then, the whole flying saucer riddle had been hidden behind a curtain of Air Force secrecy. And now, an assignment from True magazine on flying saucers. 24 hours later, I was in Ken Purdy's office. "I've had men on this for 2 months," he told me. "I might as well warn you, it's a tough story to crack." "You think it's a Russian missile?" I asked him. "Or an Air Force secret?" "We've had several answers. None of them stacks up. But I'm positive one was deliberately planted when they found we were checking." He told me the whole story of the work that had been done by the staff of True and of the reports sent in by competent writers. The deeper he delved into the mystery, the tougher the assignment got. The more I learned about flying saucers, the less I knew. "There's one angle I want rechecked," Purdy said. "You've heard of the Mantell case?" I nodded. "Okay. Try to get the details of Mantell's radio report to Godman Tower. Before he was killed, he described the thing he was chasing, we know that much. Project Saucer gave out a hint, but they've never released the transcript. Here's another lead. See if you can find anything about a secret picture taken at Harmon Field, Newfoundland. It was around July 1947. I'll send you other ideas as I get them." Before I left, Purdy wished me luck and told me that he would work in closest harmony with me. "But watch out for fake tips," he said. "You'll probably run into some people at the Pentagon who'll talk to you off the record. That handcuffs a writer. Look out they don't lead you into a blind alley. Even the Air Force statements and the Project Saucer report contradict each other. For 6 months I worked with other investigators to solve the mystery of the disks. We checked 100 sighting reports, frequently crossing the trail of Project Saucer teams and FBI agents. Old records gave fantastic leads. So did Air Force plans for exploring space. Rocket experts, astronomers, Air Force officials, and pilots gave us clues pointing to a startling solution. Many intelligent persons, including scientists, believe that the saucers contain spies from another planet. When this first phase was ended, we were faced with a hard decision. We had uncovered important facts. We knew the saucers were real. If it was handled carefully, we believed the story would be in line with a secret Air Force policy. It was finally decided to publish certain alternate conclusions. The Air Force was informed of True's intentions. No attempt was made to block publication. In the January 1950 issue of True, I reported that we had reached the following conclusions. 1. The Earth has been observed periodically by visitors from another planet. 2. This observation has increased markedly in the past 2 years. The only other possible explanation, I wrote, is that the saucers are extremely high-speed, long-range devices developed here on Earth. Such an advance, which the Air Force has denied, would require an almost incredible leap in technical progress, even for American scientists and designers. Nationwide press and radio comment followed the appearance of the article. This publicity was obviously greater than the Air Force had expected. Within 24 hours, the Pentagon was deluged with telegrams, letters, and long-distance calls. Apparently fearing a panic, the Air Force hastily stated that flying saucer reports, even those made by its own pilots and high-ranking officers, were mistakes or were caused by hysteria. But 3 days later, when it was plain that many Americans calmly accepted True's disclosures, the Air Force released a secret Project Saucer file containing this significant statement. "It will never be possible to say with certainty that any individual did not see a spaceship, an enemy missile, or other object. In this same document, there appears a confidential analysis of Air Intelligence reports. It is this summary that contains the official suggestion of space visitors' motives. After stating that such a civilization would obviously be far ahead of our own, the report adds, "Since the acts of mankind most easily observed from a distance are A-bomb explosions, we should expect some relation to obtain between the time of the A-bomb explosions, the time at which the spaceships are seen, and the time required for such ships to arrive from and return to home base." In a previous report, which alternately warned and reassured the public, the Air Force stated that space travel outside the solar system is almost a certainty. Since 1949, there has been a steady increase in saucer sightings. Most of them have been authentic reports, which Air Force denials cannot disprove. In January, mystery disks were reported over Kentucky, Indiana, Texas, Pennsylvania, and several other states. On the Seattle-Anchorage route, an air freighter was paced for 5 minutes by a night-flying saucer. When the pilots tried to close in, the strange craft zoomed at terrific speed. Later, the airline head reported that intelligence officers had quizzed the pilots for hours. "From their questions," he said, "I could tell they had a good idea of what the saucers are. One officer admitted they did, but he wouldn't say any more." Another peculiar incident occurred at Tucson, Arizona, on February 1st. Just at dusk, a weird, fiery object raced westward over the city, astonishing hundreds in the streets below. The Tucson Daily Citizen ran the story next day with a double banner headline, "Flying Saucer Over Tucson? B-29 Fails to Catch Object." Flying saucer? Secret experimental plane? Or perhaps a scout craft from Mars? Certainly the strange aircraft that blazed a smoke trail over Tucson at dusk last night defies logical explanation. It was as mystifying to experienced pilots as to groundlings who have trouble in identifying conventional planes. Cannonballing through the sky, some 30,000 feet aloft, was a fiery object shooting westward so fast it was impossible to gain any clear impression of its shape or size. At what must have been top speed, the object spewed out light-colored smoke, but almost directly over Tucson it appeared to hover for a few seconds. The smoke puffed out an angry black and then became lighter as the strange missile appeared to gain speed. The radio operator in the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base control tower contacted First Lieutenant Roy L. Jones, taking off for a cross-country flight in a B-29, and asked him to investigate. Jones revved up his swift aerial tanker, and still the unknown aircraft steadily pulled away toward California. Dr. Edwin F. Carpenter, head of the University of Arizona Department of Astronomy, said he was certain that the object was not a meteor or other natural phenomenon. Switchboards swamped. Switchboards at the Pima County Sheriff's Office and Tucson Police Station were jammed with inquiries. Hundreds saw the object. Tom Bailey, 1411 East 10th Street, thought it was a large airplane on fire. A later check showed no planes missing. He said it wavered from left to right as it passed over the mountains. Bailey also noticed that the craft appeared to slow perceptibly over Tucson. He said the smoke apparently came out in a thin, almost invisible stream, gaining substance within a few seconds. This incident had an odd sequel the following day. Its significance was not lost on the Daily Citizen. It ran another front-page story, headlined, "What do you mean only vapor trail?" As though to prove itself blameless for tilting hundreds of Tucson heads skyward, the U.S. Air Force yesterday afternoon spent hours etching vapor trails through the skies over the city. The demonstration proved conclusively, to the satisfaction of most, that the strange path of dark smoke blazed across the evening sky at dusk Wednesday was no vapor trail and did not emanate from any conventional airplane. The Wednesday night spectacle was entirely dissimilar. Then heavy smoke boiled and swirled in a broad, dark ribbon fanning out at least a mile in width and stretching across the sky in a straight line. Since there was no proof as to what caused the strange pre-dark manifestation, and because even expert witnesses were unable to explain the appearance, the matter remains a subject for interesting speculation. There is strong evidence that this story was deliberately kept off the press wires. The Associated Press and other wire services in Washington had no report. Requests for details by Frank Edwards, Mutual newscaster, and other radio commentators ran into a blank wall. At the Pentagon, I was told that the Air Force had no knowledge of the sighting or the vapor trail maneuvers. On February 22nd, two similar glowing objects were seen above Boca Chica Naval Air Station at Key West. A plane sent out to investigate was hopelessly outdistanced. It was obvious the things were at a great height. Back at the station, radar men tracked the objects as they hovered for a moment above Key West. They were found to be at least 50 miles above the earth. After a few seconds, they accelerated at high speed and streaked out of sight. On the following day, Commander Augusto Orrego, a Chilean naval officer, reported that saucers had flown above his Antarctic base. "During the bright Antarctic night," he said, "we saw flying saucers, one above the other, turning at tremendous speeds. We have photographs to prove what we saw." Early in March, Ken Purdy phoned the latest development in the investigation. He had just received a tip predicting a flurry of saucer publicity during March. It had come from an important source in Washington. "You know what it probably means," he said. "The same thing we talked about last month. But why were we tipped off in advance?" "It's one more piece in the pattern," I said. "If the tip's on the level, then they're stepping up the program." Within 3 days, reports began to pour in, from Peru, Cuba, Mexico, Turkey, and other parts of the world. Then on March 9th, a gleaming metallic disk was sighted over Dayton, Ohio. Observers at Vandalia Airport phoned Wright-Patterson Field. Scores of Air Force pilots and groundmen watched the disk as fighters raced up in pursuit. The mysterious object streaked vertically skyward, hovered for a while miles above the earth, and then disappeared. A secret report was rushed to the Civil Aeronautics Authority in Washington, then turned over to Air Force Intelligence. Soon after this, Dr. Craig Hunter, director of a medical supply firm, reported a huge elliptical saucer flying at a low altitude in Pennsylvania. He described it as metallic, with a slotted outer rim and a rotating ring just inside. On top of this sighting, thousands of people at Farmington, New Mexico, watched a large formation of disks pass high above the city. Throughout all these reports, the Air Force refused to admit the existence of flying saucers. On March 18th, it flatly denied they were Air Force secret missiles or space exploration devices. 3 days later, a Chicago and Southern airliner crew saw a fast-flying disk near Stuttgart, Arkansas. The circular craft, blinking a strange blue-white light, pulled up in an arc at terrific speed. The two pilots said they glimpsed lighted ports on the lower side as the saucer zoomed above them. The lights had a soft fluorescence, unlike anything they had seen. There was one peculiar angle in the Arkansas incident. There was no apparent attempt to muzzle the two pilots, as in earlier airline cases. Instead, a United Press interview was quickly arranged for nationwide publication. In this wire story, Captain Jack Adams and First Officer G.W. Anderson made two statements. "We firmly believe that the flying saucer we saw over Arkansas was a secret experimental type aircraft, not a visitor from outer space. We know the Air Force has denied there is anything to this flying saucer business, but we're both experienced pilots and we're not easily fooled." The day after this story appeared, I was discussing it with an airline official in Washington. "That's an odd thing," he said. "The Air Force could have persuaded those pilots, or the line president, to hush the thing up. It looks as if they wanted that story broadcast." "You mean the whole thing was planted?" "I won't say that, though it could have been. Probably they did see something, but they might have been told what to say about it. Any idea why?" He looked at me sharply. "You and Purdy probably know the answer. At a guess, I'd say it might have been planned to offset that Navy commander's report, the one on the White Sands sightings. The White Sands case had puzzled many skeptics, because the Pentagon had cleared the published report. The author, Commander R.B. McLaughlin, was a regular Navy officer. As a Navy rocket expert, he had been stationed at the White Sands Rocket Proving Ground in New Mexico. In his published article, he described 3 disk sightings at White Sands. One of the disks, a huge elliptical craft, was tracked by scientists with precision instruments at 5 miles per second. That's 18,000 miles per hour. It was found to be flying 56 miles above the Earth. 2 other disks, smaller types, were watched from 5 observation posts on hills at the proving ground. Circling at incredible speed, the 2 disks paced an Army high-altitude rocket that had just been launched, then speeded up and swiftly outclimbed the projectile. Commander McLaughlin's report, giving dates and factual details, was cleared by the Department of Defense. So was a later nationwide broadcast. Then the Air Force made its routine denial. Why was McLaughlin, a regular Navy officer subject to security screening, permitted to give out this story? Was it an incredible slip-up? Or was it part of some carefully thought-out plan? I believe it was part of an elaborate program to prepare the American people for a dramatic disclosure. For almost a year I have watched the behind-the-scenes maneuvers of those who guide this program. In the following chapters, I have tried to show the strange developments in our search for the answer, the carefully misleading tips, the blind alleys we entered, the unexpected assistance, the confidential leads, and the stunning contradictions. It has been a complicated jigsaw puzzle. Only by seeing all parts of this intricate picture can you begin to glimpse the reasons for this stubbornly hidden secret. The official explanation may be imminent. When it is finally revealed, I believe the elaborate preparation, even the wide deceit involved, will be fully justified in the minds of the American people. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2 of The Flying Saucers Are Real. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Flying Saucers Are Real by Donald Keyhoe. Chapter 2. It has been over 2 years since the puzzling death of Captain Thomas Mantell. Mantell died mysteriously in the skies south of Fort Knox. But before his radio went silent, he sent a strange message to Godman Air Force Base. The men who heard it will never forget it. It was January 7th, 1948. Crowded into the Godman Field Tower, a group of Air Force officers stared up at the afternoon sky. For just an instant, something gleamed through the broken clouds south of the base. High above the field, 3 P-51 fighters climbed with swift urgency. Heading south, they quickly vanished. The clock in the tower read 2:45. Colonel Guy Hicks, the C.O., slowly put down his binoculars. If the thing was still there, the clouds now hid it. All they could do was wait. The first alarm had come from Fort Knox, when Army MPs had relayed a state police warning. A huge gleaming object had been seen in the sky, moving toward Godman Field. Hundreds of startled people had seen it at Madisonville, 90 miles away. 30 minutes later it had zoomed up over the base. Colonel Hicks glanced around at the rest of the men in the tower. They all had a dazed look. Every man there had seen the thing, as it barreled south of the field. Even through the thin clouds, its intermittent red glow had hinted at some mysterious source of power, something outside their understanding. It was Woods, the exec, who had estimated its size. Hicks shook his head. That was unbelievable. But something had hung over Godman Field for almost an hour. The C.O. turned quickly as the loudspeaker, turned to the P-51s, suddenly came to life. "Captain Mantell to Godman. Tower Mantell to Godman Tower." The flight leader's voice had a strained tone. "I've sighted the thing," he said. "It looks metallic, and it's tremendous in size." The C.O. and Wood stared at each other. No one spoke. "The thing's starting to climb," Mantell said swiftly. "It's at 12 o'clock high, making half my speed. I'll try to close in." In 5 minutes Mantell reported again. The strange metallic object had speeded up, was now making 360 or more. At 3:08 Mantell's wingman called in. Both he and the other pilot had seen the weird object. But Mantell had outclimbed them and was lost in the clouds. 7 minutes dragged by. The men in the tower sweated out the silence. Then at 3:15 Mantell made a hasty contact. "It's still above me, making my speed or better. I'm going up to 20,000 feet. If I'm no closer, I'll abandon chase." It was his last report. Minutes later his fighter disintegrated with terrific force. The falling wreckage was scattered for thousands of feet. When Mantell failed to answer the tower, one of his pilots began a search. Climbing to 33,000 feet, he flew 100 miles to the south. But the thing that lured Mantell to his death had vanished from the sky. 10 days after Mantell was killed, I learned of a curious sequel to the Godman affair. An AP account in the New York Times had caught my attention. The story, released at Fort Knox, admitted Mantell had died while chasing a flying saucer. Colonel Hicks was quoted as having watched the object, which was still unidentified. But there was no mention of Mantell's radio messages, no hint of the thing's tremendous size. Though I knew the lid was probably on, I went to the Pentagon. When the scare had first broken in the summer of '47, I had talked with Captain Tom Brown, who was handling saucer inquiries. But by now, Brown had been shifted, and no one in the press branch would admit knowing the details of the Mantell saucer chase. "We just don't know the answer," a security officer told me. "There's a rumor," I said, "it's a secret Air Force missile that sometimes goes out of control." "Good God, man!" he exploded. "If it was, do you think we'd be ordering pilots to chase the damned things?" "No, and I didn't say I believed it." I waited until he cooled down. "This order you mentioned, Is it for all Air Force pilots or special fighter units? I didn't say it was a special order, he answered quickly. All pilots have routine instructions to report unusual items. They had fighters alerted on the coast when the scare first broke, I reminded him. Are those orders still in force? He shook his head. No, not that I know of. After a moment, he added, all I can tell you is that the Air Force is still investigating. We honestly don't know the answer. As I went out the mall entrance, I ran into Jack Daly, one of Washington's veteran newsmen. Before the war, Jack and I had done magazine pieces together, usually on Axis espionage and communist activity. I told him I was trying to find the answer to Mantell's death. You heard anything? I asked him. Only what was in the AP story, said Jack. But an INS man told me they had a saucer story from Columbus, Ohio, and it might have been the same one they saw at Fort Knox. I missed that. What was it? They sighted the thing at the Air Force field outside of Columbus. It was around sundown, about 2 hours after that pilot was killed in Kentucky. Anybody chase it? I asked. No, they didn't have time to take off, I guess. This INS guy said it was going like hell. Fast as a jet, anyway. Did he say what it looked like? The Air Force boys said it was as big as a C-47, said Jack. Maybe bigger. It had a reddish-orange exhaust streaming out behind. They could see it for miles. If you hear any more, let me know, I said. Jack promised he would. What do you think they are? He asked me. It's got me stumped. Russia wouldn't be testing missiles over here. Anyway, I can't believe they've got anything like that. And I can't see the Air Force letting pilots get killed to hide something we've got. 1 week later, I heard that a top-secret unit had been set up at Wright Field to investigate all saucer reports. When I called the Pentagon, they admitted this much, and that was all. In the next few months, other flying disc stories hit the front pages. 2 Eastern Airline pilots reported a double-decked mystery ship sighted near Montgomery, Alabama. I learned of 2 other sightings, one over the Pacific Ocean and one in California. The second one, seen through field glasses, was described as rocket-shaped, as large as a B-29. There were also rumors of discs being tracked by radar, but it was almost a year before I confirmed these reports. When Purdy wired me, early in May of '49, I had half forgotten the discs. It had been months since any important sightings had been reported. But his message quickly revived my curiosity. If he thought the subject was hot, I knew he must have reasons. When I walked into his office at 67 West 44th, Purdy stubbed out his cigarette and shook hands. He looked at me through his glasses for a moment. Then he said abruptly, "You know anything about the discs? If you mean what they are, no." He motioned for me to sit down. Then he swiveled his chair around, his shoulders hunched forward, and frowned out the window. "Have you seen the Post this week?" I told him no. "There's something damned queer going on. For 15 months, Project Saucer is buttoned up tight. Top secret. Then suddenly Forrestal gets the Saturday Evening Post to run 2 articles, brushing the whole thing off. The first piece hits the stands, and then what happens?" Purdy swung around, jabbed his finger at a document on his desk. "That same day, the Air Force rushes out this Project Saucer report. It admits they haven't identified the discs in any important cases. They say it's still serious enough. Wait a minute." He thumbed through the stapled papers. "To require constant vigilance by Project Saucer personnel and the civilian population. You'd think the Post would make a public kick," I said. "I don't mean it's an out-and-out denial," said Purdy. "It doesn't mention the Post, just contradicts it. In fact, the report contradicts itself. It looks as if they're trying to warn people, and yet they're scared to say too much." I looked at the title on the report. "A Digest of Preliminary Studies by the Air Materiel Command, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, on Flying Saucers. Have the papers caught it yet?" I asked Purdy. "You mean it's contradicting the Post?" He shook his head. "No, the Pentagon press release didn't get much space. How many editors would wade through a 6,000-word governmental report? Even if they did, they'd have to compare it, item for item, with the Post piece. Who wrote the Post story?" Purdy lit a cigarette and frowned out again at the skyscrapers. "Sidney Shallett, and he's careful. He had Forrestal's backing. The Air Force flew him around, arranged interviews, supposedly gave him inside stuff. He spent 2 months on it. They okayed his script, which practically says the saucers are bunk. Then they reneged on it. Maybe some top brass suddenly decided it was the wrong policy to brush it off," I suggested. "Why the quick change?" demanded Purdy. "Let's say they sold the Post on covering up the truth, in the interests of security. It's possible, though I don't believe it. Or they could simply have fed them a fake story. Either way, why did they rush this contradiction the minute the Post hit the stands?" "Something serious happened," I said, "after the Post went to press." "Yes, but what?" Purdy said impatiently. "That's what we've got to find out. Does Shallett's first piece mention Mantell's death?" "Explains it perfectly. You know what Mantell was chasing? The planet Venus." "That's the Post's answer?" I said incredulously. "It's what the Air Force contract astronomer told Shallett. I've checked with 2 astronomers here. They say that even when Venus is at full magnitude, you can barely see it in the daytime, even when you're looking for it. It was only half magnitude that day, so it was practically invisible." "How'd the Air Force expect anybody to believe that answer?" I said. Purdy shrugged. "They deny it was Venus in this report. But that's what they told Shallett, that all those Air Force officers, the pilots, the Kentucky State Police, and several hundred people at Madisonville mistook Venus for a metallic disk several hundred feet in diameter. It's a wonder Shallett believed it. I don't think he did. He says if it wasn't Venus, it must have been a balloon." "What's the Air Force answer?" I asked Purdy. "Look in the report. They say whatever Mantell chased, they call it a mysterious object, is still unidentified." I glanced through the case report on page 5. It quoted Mantell's radio report that the thing was metallic and tremendous in size. Linked with the death of Mantell was the Lockbourne, Ohio report, which tied in with what Jack Daly had told me over a year before. I read the report. "On the same day, about 2 hours later, a sky phenomenon was observed by several watchers over Lockbourne Air Force Base, Columbus, Ohio. It was described as round or oval, larger than a C-47, and traveling." Chapter 19 of The Flying Saucers Are Real. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Flying Saucers Are Real by Donald Keyhoe. Chapter 19. For 2 weeks after my return to Washington, General Sory Smith held off a final answer about my trip to Wright Field. Meantime, Ken Purdy had called him, backing my request to see the project files. It was obvious to me that Wright Field was determined not to open the files, but the General was trying to avoid making it official. "Why can't you accept my word there's nothing to the saucers?" he asked me one day. "You're impeaching my personal veracity." But finally he saw there was no other way out. He told me I had been officially refused permission to see the Wright Field files. Some time later, Ken Purdy phoned General Smith. "General, if the Air Force wants to talk to us off the record, we'll play ball. True, we'll either handle it from then on whatever way you think best, or we'll keep still." Whether this offer was relayed higher up, I don't know, but nothing came of it. Meantime, saucer reports had begun to come in from all over the country. Some even came from abroad. Some of these 1950 sightings have already been mentioned in early chapters. Besides the strange affair at Tucson on February 1st, there were several other cases in February. 3 of these were in South America. One saucer was reported near the Naval Air Station at Alameda, California. Some were sighted in Texas, New Mexico, and other parts of the Southwest. In March, the wave of sightings reached such a height that the Air Force again denied the saucer's existence. This followed a report that a flying disc had crashed near Mexico City and that the wreckage had been viewed by U.S. Air Force officials. Scores of Orangeburg, South Carolina residents watched a disc that hovered over that city on March 10th. It was described as silver bright, turning slowly in the air before it disappeared. The day before this, residents of Van Nuys, California, saw a bright disk moving swiftly 400 feet in the air. Seen through a telescope, it appeared to be 50 feet in diameter. Disks were reported at numerous places in Mexico, including Guadalajara, Juarez, Mazatlan, and Durango. On the 12th of March, the crew and passengers of an American Airlines ship saw a large gleaming disk high above Monterrey Airport in Mexico. Captain W.R. Hunt, the senior airline pilot, watched the disk through a theodolite at the airport. This disk and most of the others seen in Mexico were similar in description to the one sighted at Dayton, Ohio on March 8th. This was the large metallic saucer that hovered high over Vandalia Airport until Air Force and National Guard fighters raced up after it. The disk rose vertically into the sky at incredible speed, hovered a while longer, and then vanished. Within 24 hours, this mystery disk had been identified as the planet Venus. It was broad daylight. Newspapers quoted trained astronomical officials in Dayton as the source for this explanation. Meanwhile, the Mexican government newspaper, El Nacional, quoted a famous and reputable astronomer as saying the numerous disks reported over Mexico carry visitors from Mars. One of the strangest reports came from the Naval Air Station at Dallas, Texas. It was about 11:30 a.m. on March 16th when CPO Charles Lewis saw a disk streak up at a B-36 bomber. The disk appeared about 20 to 25 feet in diameter, Lewis reported. Racing at incredible speed, it shot up under the bomber, hung there for a second, then broke away at a 45-degree angle. Following this, it shot straight up into the air and disappeared. Captain M.A. Nation, CO of the station, said it was the second report in 10 days. On March 7th, said Captain Nation, a tower control operator named C.E. Edmondson saw a similar disk flying so fast it was almost a blur. He estimated its speed at 3,000 to 4,000 miles per hour, Captain Nation stated. Of course, he had no instruments to compute the speed, so that's a pure estimate. It was some time before this when I heard the first crazy rumor about the guided missile display. This story, which had new details every time I heard it, described the Air Force as refusing to let the Navy announce a new type of missile. According to the rumors, the Air Force was trying to prove its own missile far superior, to keep the Navy from invading its long-range bombing domain. Then the Army joined the pitched battle with still a third guided missile, according to the rumors. And the flying discs? Army, Navy, and Air Force missiles launched in droves all over the country to prove whose was the best? A public missile race, with a Joint Chiefs of Staff to decide the winner. It seems fantastic that this theory would be believed by any intelligent person. In effect, it accuses the armed services of deliberate criminal negligence, of endangering millions in the cities below. I am convinced that some of these rumors led to at least one of the published guesses about our missile program. One widely publicized story stated that the flying saucers seen hurtling through our skies are actually two types of secret weapons. One, according to radio and newspaper accounts, is a disk that whizzes through space, halts suspended in the air, soars to 30,000 feet, drops to 1,000 feet, and then usually disintegrates in the air. These saucers, it was said, ranged from 20 inches to 250 feet in diameter. They were supposed to be pilotless and harmless. The second type was said to be a jet version of the Navy's circular airfoil Flying Flapjack. It was credited with fantastic speed. The true discs, however, were mainly Air Force devices, according to the report. "Some are guided, others are not," said the radio commentator who released this story. "They can stay stationary, dash off to right or left, and move like lightning, but they are utterly harmless." In these "harmless" discs there was supposed to be an explosive charge that destroyed them in mid-air at a predetermined time. Within a few days after this story was broadcast, the United States News and World Report declared that the saucers are real and identified them as jet models of Navy Flying Flapjacks. This magazine, which is not an official publication despite its name, mentioned the variable direction jet principle that I had previously described in the True article. These two flying saucer explanations brought denials from the White House, the Navy, and the Air Force. The Air Force flatly declared that 1. None of the armed forces is conducting secret experiments with disc-shaped flying objects that could be a basis for the reported phenomena. 2. There is no evidence that the latter stem from the activities of any foreign nation. Before this, President Truman stated he knew nothing of any such objects being developed by the United States or any other nation. The Navy denial came immediately after the first broadcast story. It ran, "The Navy is not engaged in research or in flying any jet-powered, circular-shaped aircraft." The Navy added that one model of a pancake-shaped aircraft, called the Zimmerman Skimmer, was built but was never flown. However, a small 3,000-pound scale model did fly and was under radio control during flight. This last device is now being rumored as the Navy's unpiloted missile, said to have been launched over the country like the so-called harmless discs. Even though all these accounts have been officially denied, many Americans may still believe they are true. I have no desire to criticize the authors of these stories. I believe that in following up certain guided missile leads, they were misled into accepting the conclusions they gave. But these stories, particularly the accounts of huge unpiloted discs, may have planted certain fears in the public mind, fears that are completely unwarranted. For this reason, I have personally checked at Washington in regard to the dangers of unpiloted missiles. Here are the facts I learned. 1. Neither the Army, Navy, nor Air Force has at any time staged any guided missile competition as rumored. 2. No unpiloted missiles or remote-controlled experimental craft have been tested over American cities or heavily populated areas. 3. No unpiloted missile carrying dangerous explosives, whether for destruction of the device or other purposes, has been deliberately launched or tested over heavily populated areas. In regard to the so-called jet-propelled flying flapjack, I have been assured by Admiral Calvin Bolster of the Navy Bureau of Aeronautics that this type of plane has never been produced. I concede that he might make this statement to conceal a secret development, but there is one fact of which every American can be certain. Neither this type nor the radio-controlled smaller model has been or will be flown or launched over areas where people would be endangered. The three armed services are working on guided missiles. They are not risking American lives by launching such missiles at random across the United States. Although most of our guided missile projects are secret, it is possible to give certain facts about guided missile developments in general. The first successful long-range missiles were produced by the Germans. These were the Buzz Bomb and the V-2 rocket. But research in various other types was carried on during the war. Some of this was with oval and round types of airfoils. As already stated by Paul Riddell, there is strong evidence that the disc-shaped foil resulted from German observations of either spaceships or remote-control disc-shaped observer units. All the Nazi space exploration plans followed this discovery that we were being observed by a race from another planet. After the end of World War II, the international guided missile race began, with the British, Russians, and ourselves as the chief contenders. Numerous types have been developed: winged bombs, small, radar-guided projectiles launched from planes, and ground-to-plane, plane-to-ground, and plane-to-plane missiles, equipped with target homing devices. In certain recent types, the range can be stated as several hundred miles. So far as I have learned, after weeks of rechecking this point, not a single long-range missile has been identified as Russian. Since this country is working closely with Great Britain on global defense problems, it is no violation of security to say that we have probably exchanged certain guided missile information. In regard to the British long-range missile picture outlined to me by John Steele, I can state two major facts. 1. The British have categorically denied testing such long-range missiles over American territory where they might endanger American citizens. There is convincing evidence that they are telling the truth. 2. There is no British missile now built or planned that could explain the object seen by Captain Mantell, Childs and Whitted, and witnesses in most of the major sightings. The preceding statement applies equally to American-built missiles. There is no experimental craft or guided missile even remotely considered in this country that would begin to approach the dimensions and performance of the spaceships seen in these cases. There is concrete evidence that the United States is as well advanced as any other nation in guided missile development. Certain recent advances should place us in the lead, unless confidential reports on Soviet progress are completely wrong. If American scientists and engineers can learn the source of the spaceship's power and adapt it to our use, it may well be the means for ending the threat of war. The Soviet scientists are well aware of this. Their research into cosmic rays and other natural forces has been redoubled since the flying saucer reports of 1947. The secret of the spaceship's power is more important than even the hydrogen bomb. It may someday be the key to the fate of the world. End of Chapter 19. Chapter 20 of The Flying Saucers Are Real. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Flying Saucers Are Real by Donald Keyhoe. Chapter 20. After 1 year's investigation of the flying saucers and Air Force operations, I have come to the following conclusions. 1. The Air Force was puzzled and badly worried when the discs were first sighted in 1947. 2. The Air Force began to suspect the truth soon after Mantell's death, perhaps even before. 3. Project Saucer was set up to investigate and at the time conceal from the public the truth about the saucers. 4. During the spring of 1949, this policy, which had been strictly maintained by Forrestal, underwent an abrupt change. On top-level orders, it was decided to let the facts gradually leak out in order to prepare the American people. 5. This was the reason for the April 27, 1949 report, with its suggestions about space visitors. 6. While I was preparing the article for the January 1950 issue of True, it had been considered in line with the general education program. But the unexpected public reaction was mistaken by the Air Force for hysteria, resulting in their hasty denial that the saucers existed. 7. Because the Air Force feared any closer analysis of the Mantell case, Major Boggs was instructed to publicize the Venus explanation. Although it had been denied, the Air Force knew that most people had forgotten this or had never known it. 8. Major Boggs, having stated this answer publicly, along with the other Chiles Whitted and Gorman answers, was forced to stick to it, though he knew it was wrong and that the case summaries would prove it. 9. The case summaries were released to a small number of Washington newsmen to continue planting the space travel thought. This decision being made after True's reception proved to the Air Force that the public was better prepared than had been thought. In regard to the flying saucers themselves, I believe that in the majority of cases, spaceships are the answer. 1. The Earth has been under periodic observation from another planet, or other planets, for at least 2 centuries. 2. This observation suddenly increased in 1947, following the series of A-bomb explosions begun in 1945. 3. The observation, now intermittent, is part of a long-range survey and will continue indefinitely. No immediate attempt to contact the Earth seems evident. There may be some unknown block to making contact, but it is more probable that the spaceman's plans are not complete. I believe that the Air Force is still investigating the saucer sightings, either through the Air Materiel Command or some other headquarters. It is possible that some Air Force officials still fear a panic when the truth is officially revealed. In that case, we may continue for a long time to see routine denials, alternating with new suggestions of interplanetary travel. The education problem is complicated by 2 imperative needs. We must try to learn as much as we can about the spaceship's source of power, and at the same time try to prevent clues to this information from reaching an enemy on Earth. If censorship is suddenly imposed on all flying saucer reports, this would be the chief reason. This would also help solve a minor problem where partial censorship now exists. A few test missiles launched from the Southwest base have been seen by citizens at a distance from the proving grounds. In some cases, their reports have got into local papers, though the wire services did not carry them. These missile tests are peculiarly different from the general run of flying saucer reports. Contrasted with the Chiles Whitted, Mantell, and other spaceship sightings, they stand out with a certain pattern, easy to recognize. News or radio reports of these tests might accidentally give an enemy clues to the type, speed, and range of this particular missile, once he learned the pattern. Periodic censorship, or even a complete blackout of sighting reports, may be enforced during the next year or so. For the purposes mentioned, such action would be justified. But whenever such censorship is lifted, the complete truth about space visitors should be told at the same time, the full details of all the major cases, the size of the Godman Field spaceship, any attempted landings or other efforts at contact by interplanetary visitors, and all other details that now are official secrets. I also believe that a certain group of disk sightings in this country is linked with our guided missiles. Official announcements, of course, may be delayed a long time. With this exception, I believe that Americans should be told the truth, now. When the announcement of our guided missiles is made, some Americans not familiar with the facts may accept it as a full answer. If officials are not yet ready to reveal the space travel facts, the Mantell evidence and other key cases may be deliberately glossed over. But even if all the evidence, the worldwide sightings, the old records, the Chiles Whitted and other cases, should be completely ignored, Americans cannot escape eventual contact with dwellers on other planets. Even though space visitors never attempt contact with us, sooner or later Earthlings will be traveling to distant planets, planets that scientists have said are almost surely inhabited. The American people have proved their ability to take incredible things. We have survived the stunning impact of the atomic age. We should be able to take the interplanetary age, when it comes, without hysteria. End of chapter 20. End of The Flying Saucers Are Real by Donald Keyhoe. This recording by Roger Melin.